And we're going to have our benediction and we're going to leave. That was awesome. Way to show me up or whatever. We ended last week. We're going through a series, part of the Gospels, but we're looking at the 7 times, depending on how you count it, it could be 8, but the 7 times that Jesus made an I am statement. And he says, I am, 7 different times. And when he says I am, what he's literally saying is the name of God. He's literally saying Yahweh. It is the sound of breathing. It is Yahweh. Every time you take a breath, you're literally saying the name of God. I love to say that to atheists. Every breath you take, you're proclaiming God's name. But Jesus said 7 times, I am. And we have a tendency to think that they're just sound bites. We have a tendency to say, when Jesus says, I am the bread, it's like when you're sitting around one day and just like, that'll be a great sound bite. That'll be something people will like post on Facebook one day. I am the bread of life. That was my best God voice, sorry. But that's not how it happened at all. And I hope that you picked that up over the first part of the series, because what happened was every time that Jesus made an I am statement, every time he declared, I am Yahweh, in other words, he's saying, I'm God, but it was in response to a specific circumstance that was going on at the moment. At the moment, he made these statements, all of them. He made every single statement in response to something that was going on at the time. So you always have to back up and see what was going on, who was Jesus talking to, what was the circumstance, why did he say, I am the light of the world, or I am the bread of life, or I am whatever else. It is always in response. And so today, we're going to look at another one. Today, he says, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you take that, and if you just take that sound bite, man, we can tweet that, right? We can make that go viral. Listen, that's a great saying. But what do you think of when you hear that? You think of eternity, right? That's the obvious answer. I am the resurrection. We think about death. I am the resurrection and I am the life. Oh, yeah, listen, Jesus died for sure. And he rose from the dead, absolutely. So that we can be saved, so that one day we will raise from the dead. All of that is absolutely true. That's not what he was saying in this instance. So we're going to back up and we're going to look at what was going on and what did he actually mean when he said this. Of course that is true. But in this moment, there was a bigger story that he wanted them to get and he wanted you to get. Because he didn't just say, I came to give you life in the future. What he literally said, where we ended last week, was, I came to give you abundant life now. And you cannot have an abundant life until you die. We're not talking about physical. We're talking about spirit. Until you die to yourself, you cannot live. So we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Last week, we were talking about sheep. Jesus said last week, I am. This is in John chapter 10, verse 9. He says, I am the gate. And whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and they will go out and they will find pasture. But the thief, talking about Satan, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, or have it to the fullest, an abundant life. He says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father except through me. In other words, you can't be plagued. He's talking to the religious people. And he's saying, listen, you're hypocrites. You're actors. You're going through the motions. You're acting like sheep. You're acting like sheep. You're sounding like sheep. You're looking like sheep. But what he's saying is, but you're just planting. What you really are is you're a goat. He tells a parable or a story in Matthew, I think it was 15, Matthew 25. In Matthew chapter 25, he talks about the sheep and the goats. And he says, listen, in the end, I'm going to come and I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats. And when we read that, we assume he's talking about in the end times. What we really think is we're the sheep. That's what we think. Like, we're the sheep. And out there, those guys, those heathens, that's the goats. And see, we can work with that. That makes us feel good about ourselves. Unfortunately, that's not what he was talking about. He was saying inside the church, like in here, don't be looking around, but in here, there's some goats. And you might be a goat. Listen, the first time I ever preached here, the very first time I ever preached here, back when we had the old sign that you had to physically change, I was working at Whiting Field, and they texted me and they said, "Hey, what's the name of your sermon going to be?" And I was filling in for whoever was the pastor at the time. "What's the name of your sermon going to be?" And so I texted back, and I thought, well, this would be funny. And so I said, "You're a goat." And I thought they'll put that on the sign. That'd be hilarious. That's not what got put on the sign. This has got nothing to do with the sermon, but what actually got put on the sign was, so they printed out what I had texted, and I had texted it from a Verizon phone, and the very first thing it said at the top of the Verizon, or of the email, since it came from a Verizon phone, was sent from Verizon. So guess what the sign said for a whole week? Johnny Johnson, preaching Sunday, sent from Verizon. What it's supposed to say is, you might be a goat. I had a rabbi tell me, I went to a Jewish synagogue one time, a Messianic synagogue where they're Jews. They're full-on Jews, but they also believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And so he was preaching on that. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, so what does that mean? Because he was not saying it the same way that I had always heard it. He's like, listen, in Israel, even today, but especially back then, in Israel, you have like sheep and goats and everything else like out in the fields during the day. But at night, they will separate them out because you can't have sheep and goats together because the goats will antagonize and they will harass the sheep at night. So you have to separate them out. He said, usually it's not a big deal. He says, you put the goats in one pen, you put the sheep in the other pen, it's not a big deal. He said, the problem is, though, baby sheep and baby goats look a lot alike. And they sound almost identical. He says, so the literal translation of that verse is, I'm going to separate out the indeed sheep, the real sheep, from the kids. That's the literal translation. I'm going to separate out the indeed sheep, the real sheep, from ones who look like sheep and act like sheep and talk like sheep. Listen, before y'all start pointing fingers at anybody, this is the moving target. There's times that we are all goats. There's times that we are all just kind of going through the motion. We are hypocrites. We are play acting sometimes in our walk with Christ. And so Jesus is like, I want to get y'all back on target. And the way he's going to do this is by talking about one of his favorite subjects, the one subject that we all hate to talk about, death. He talked about death, and he talked about hell, and he talked about money more than he talked about anything else. He's like, are you kidding me? How would you ever expect to grow a church like that? So he starts out, and we're going to look at an event that took place where one of his best friends is about to die. And he finds out. And he does something crazy. On purpose, he stays away and lets him die. On purpose. What kind of friend is that? But you're going to see the reason he did it was so that we would come in here today. You're not here by accident, so that you would come in here today and you would hear what he has to say about this event, because it's not just about eternity. It's about the moment you step out of here today. So let's take a look at it. John chapter 11, verse 1. We're kind of picking up where we left off from last week, but the difference is about 2 months has expired or has gone by. So John chapter 11, verse 1 says this. Now a man named Lazarus was sick, and he was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now this Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, is the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. That hasn't happened yet, but John's telling you that that's coming in the future. So the sister sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one that you love is sick. Now John's writing this. John loves to describe himself as, I'm the one that Jesus loves. Look at me. Not only am I faster than Peter, he names that a couple of different times. I can outrun Peter, but I'm the one that Jesus loves. I'm kind of his favorite. The only other person he says anything similar about is Lazarus. So Lazarus had to be very special to Jesus. So Lazarus is very sick. And the sisters sent word to Jesus, and they knew that Jesus could heal him if he got here soon enough. And Jesus is only 2 miles away. 2 miles. If you walk 2 miles an hour, which is not that hard, you can literally, it says he's less than 2 miles away. You can literally be there in less than an hour. But Jesus doesn't just come over there. On purpose, he waits 4 days. Verse 4. And when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. This sickness will not end in death. This is where, if you keep reading the story, it gets a little funny to me. Because what they hear, this is my interpretation, what they hear when Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death, what they hear Jesus saying is just rub some dirt on it and get up. I think that that's what they're hearing. You'll see this in a second. So why does he say that? What they hear is just rub some dirt on it. Who does he sound like? Who does that sound like? It sounds like a coach. Y'all talking about being coaches. It sounds like a coach. We got several coaches in here. I had coaches. It's like, man, you get hit with a ball in baseball, what do they tell you? Just don't rub it. Don't rub it. Like, how's that going to help? How is it going to help the team if I don't rub it? I got 4 kids. The first one, you kind of baby a little bit. By the time you get to that 4th one, you're just like, rub some dirt on it. I was the first child. My mom didn't wait around for the 4th one. My mom, I'm not going to look at her. My mom was the type from child 1, you ain't going to die. Get up. There's one time that I was trying to be Evel Knievel. Evel Knievel was big back in the day when I was growing up. And I had this purple bicycle with like the handlebars that came down like this, and that thing was sweet. Had a banana seat on it. Had the big fat, like flat tire in the back. Not a BMX bike, by the way. This is not meant for jumping ramps, but I did. And so I would build a ramp, and so I was so proud of myself, and I built this ramp. It was just a piece of wood on a block, and boy, I was just wearing that thing out. I was like, oh, I am so good. I got to show my mama. So I called my mama outside. But I decided to up my game a little bit. So I had a red wagon, and instead of being smart and turning the wagon sideways and jumping it, I'm doing this Evel Knievel stuff. I'm going long ways over the wagon. And it would have worked if I'd had about that much more distance. But I didn't. And the front tire landed in the wagon with my mama so proud standing on the porch watching this. The front tire lands in the wagon begins to go with me. Then the wagon decided, well, this ain't as much fun as I thought it was going to be, so the wagon stops. I didn't. And I wound up in a heap with a purple bicycle with a banana seat on top of me, laying there thinking, I'm dying. And you know what my sweet mama says? Well, that wasn't the smartest thing you ever did. She's looking at me. Rub some dirt on it. Get up. You ain't going to die. That's how I hear this part of the scripture. When the disciples hear Jesus say, this ain't going to end in death, what I think they hear is, just rub some dirt on it. You're going to be fine. Get up. And so he doesn't go for 4 days. When Jesus got the word that Lazarus was sick, look what he actually says. This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. He's saying this sickness will not end in death. It's for God's glory. Listen, there's a lot of people in this church and in our families who are suffering through sickness and through illnesses right now. And you know what Jesus is saying? Like, read it for yourself. This sickness will not end in death. Does that mean you're not going to die? Of course we're all going to die. We all have to pay taxes. We all have to die. We're going to die. Because you cannot truly be alive until you die. You cannot live until you die. And so, yeah, he's talking about eternity. And yeah, he's talking about, listen, one day Lazarus is going to be dead and stay dead. One day Lazarus is going to die for good. But even that is not going to end in death. He is going to be resurrected. And then he's going to have a real life. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. He says right now, this is not going to end in death. This is going to end in a resurrection. Right here, right now. See, Jesus had just had an argument with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they had told him, tell us plainly if you're the Messiah. And he did. He told them plainly. And so then they wanted to kill him because he was saying that he is the Messiah. So what he's about to do right here, in front of all these witnesses, is he's going to set the one miracle that will prove he has to be God. Because no one can raise somebody back from the dead. And what the Jews believed with all their heart is, listen, up to 3 days, you might have just been in a coma. Listen, if somebody is dead, up to 3 days, they might wake back up. But after 4 days, it is impossible. And they taught that only God himself could possibly raise somebody from the dead who had been dead 4 days. So what does Jesus do? I'll be there in 4 days. On purpose. He let his friend die on purpose. So that you sitting here today could understand why. God will allow you to die so that he can raise you to a better life. And so he does that right here, right now, with the abundant life. It's called being born again. So you have to die to be raised to an abundant life. And he said that this would not end in death. In death. This will not end in death. The actual word there is the word pros. It's like when we say pros and cons. That's where the word comes from. And it probably is where we get that pros and cons from. But what pros actually means is, pros means to the advantage of. So what Jesus is actually saying when he says this will not end in death, he is saying this is not going to end in the advantage of death. Death is not going to have an advantage right here. Not only is this sickness not going to end in death, it's not going to end in the advantage of death. No, he says for God's glory. So John 11, verse 5, he says this. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, now let us go back to Judea. Verse 16, then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. That's why I think what they heard Jesus say, I think they heard him say, just rub some dirt on it. Because a lot of commentators want to give Thomas credit here, and maybe this is true. Maybe Thomas was being brave. The guy that we call doubting Thomas later, maybe Thomas is actually stepping up and being brave. Like, listen, if Jesus is going to go back and be killed, because they'd already threatened me, if you show back up, we're going to kill you. And so Thomas says, listen, if he's going to go back and be killed, we all need to go back and be killed. But honestly, more than likely, what theologians believe is that Thomas at this point was saying sarcastically, well, listen, we might as well go and get killed too. They think that this was sarcasm. Verse 17, he says, so on the arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. And now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. He's less than an hour's walk away. He had already been dead and in the grave for 4 days. And so as far as the Jews were concerned, it was impossible for him to be raised from the dead. Verse 20, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you had been here, if you had showed up, my brother would not have died. You were less than an hour away. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And look at Martha's answer. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She's still talking about, oh yeah, one day you're going to raise him again when you come back in all your glory. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. One day that's going to happen. But that's not what he's talking about right here. Because right now, Jesus is going to make his 5th I am statement about himself. Verse 25 of John 11. Jesus said to her, in answer to that, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. When he said this is not going to end in death, he wasn't just talking about one day in the future. No. He's talking about today. Today, a man who is dead is going to be raised to life because of me, Yahweh. I am God. And I am the resurrection. And I am life. Not just for the future, but for you today. Today, you can be raised from the dead. I am the resurrection and the life. And the one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. You hear what she says? He's like, I'm right here. Can't you see me? I'm right here. And you're talking about, oh yeah, one day you're going to come back in all your glory. I'm right here today. We're not talking about a resurrection and a life one day. For sure, that's going to happen. We're talking about today. Jesus is like, I'm in front of you today. For the past few weeks, we've been looking at that. For the past few weeks, whenever the priests were going through all their rituals, and they took the water, and they got down on their knees, and every step, they would recite this quoted prayer, and they would get up, and they would kneel down, and they would say that same prayer, and they would do that prayer, and do that prayer, all the way up the Temple Mount. And when they got to the top of the thing. They would pour it out, and it was a celebration. This ritual is a celebration of one day the Messiah is going to come, and he's going to pour out, that's what the water symbolizes, pour out his Holy Spirit on us. And Jesus says, are you thirsty? I'm right here. We dance all around Jesus. We do rites and rituals, and we go through all the motions and all the ceremonies all around Jesus, and the whole time trying to get his attention, and the whole time he's like, I'm right here. Stop. Look at me. It's not a religion. It's a relationship. I am Yahweh. I am the resurrection and the life right here, right now. But she still didn't get it. So then she leaves and she goes and gets her sister. Now we're in verse 32 of John 11. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her, these words are important. We just read right over this and we kind of mash them all together, but they are not the same words. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit, and he was troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then it says, Jesus wept. And there's always been a big question. Well, he must have really, why did Jesus weep? I mean, if Jesus knew he was going to raise him from the dead, why did Jesus weep? And so we don't understand everything that was going on because we just kind of mash all this together. One of my favorite writers, one of my favorite theologians is and mainly because I like to say his name, but I love this guy by the name of Dr. Fruchtenbaum. It's just fun to say. Dr. Fruchtenbaum is a great theologian, and I want to read you something about what he says. Here's what he says. When it says in verse 33 that Mary and the Jews who had come with her were weeping, it is the word klaio, which literally means they were loud wailing. They were wailing like out loud. And then when it says that Jesus was deeply moved in spirit, when he saw them, that's the word, and I'm going to mess this all up, embramaio, close enough, embramaio, and what it actually means is that he was filled with indignation. What it literally means is he snorted angrily. See, we water this down. No, he snorted angrily when he saw this. He wasn't mad at them. Don't get that impression. But it says that they were loudly wailing, and he was deeply moved in spirit, and he snorted with anger. And it says he was troubled. And that's the word tarasso, which means he was agitated. So according to Dr. Fruchtenbaum, what this verse should really be read as is this. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her and the Jews who had come along with her weeping and wailing loudly, he was filled with indignation. And he was agitated, and he snorted with anger, where have you laid him? To which they said, come and see, Lord, they replied. He wasn't mad at them, though. Who was he mad at? He was mad at death. Because death didn't have to be here. When it says Jesus wept, he says, this is not the same word as in their loud wailing. This is the word dakruo, and it simply means that he shed tears. So Jesus was deeply moved, but it says that when he wept, it was not the type of weeping that they were doing. It was not in mourning. He knew how this was going to end. He said that this was not going to be to the advantage of death, but for the glory of God. So he was not weeping as if he was mourning. The word for Jesus, for what Jesus did here, when it says Jesus wept, it is the word that means he angrily cried. He was mad. He was mad at death. because it was not supposed to be this way in the beginning. And so Jesus says, I am the resurrection and I am life. And he's already told us that Satan is the one who has come to kill and to steal and destroy. It's never supposed to have been this way. And so he says this is not going to end in your advantage. This is not going to end in the advantage of death. When Jesus rises from the dead after 3 days, he's going to conquer death. He's going to destroy death itself. 1 Corinthians, here's what Paul writes. 1 Corinthians 15:25. For he must reign until he has put all of his enemies under his feet. And the last enemy to be destroyed is death. In Revelation, in chapter 20, it talks about how death and Hades are thrown into the lake of fire. But in 21, here's what it says. Revelation 21:3 says, And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be their God. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And there will be no more death. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. So back to John 11, Jesus once more deeply moved, it says, he came to the tomb. And it was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. And Jesus says, take away the stone. Listen to Martha. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. So that's the same word. What it actually says is, Jesus angrily snorted, take away the stone. I want to reread that verse in the King James Version. Somebody asked me last week, how come y'all don't use the King James Version? I'm like, same reason I don't read Latin. It's not the way we talk now. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. The King James Version is fantastic. And sometimes I do like to use it because sometimes it just gets the point across better. Like right now. John 11:38 in the King James says, Jesus therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone lay upon it. And Jesus said, take ye away the stone. And Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh. It just don't get no plainer than that. Lord, by this time he stinketh. That's Bible. I love Martha. I love her. Jesus comes up and snorts angrily. This is not going to end in death. Move that stone. I got work to do. And Martha, bless her heart, Lord, he stinketh. What was she worried about? Was she worried that Jesus couldn't do what he said he was going to do? No. You know what she was worried about? She was worried about other people, because there's other people there weeping loudly. She's worried that other people are going to be offended. Other people are going to see something that God told you to do. And you're worried that they're going to think that it stinketh. Sometimes God tells you to do something that might offend somebody else. And Jesus says, don't worry about it, they think it stinketh. It's not between you and them. It's between you and God. And if you don't do what God called you to do because you're worried about offending somebody else, you know what happens? The dead stay dead. You cannot be raised to life if you don't roll with stone. Jesus is wanting to perform the greatest miracle that had ever been performed up to that point, and Martha is only concerned with how it's going to smell. Will it offend the other people? Will somebody be offended? Will somebody not like it? And then in verse 40 of John 11, Jesus says, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? You will see the glory of God if you believe me and do what I say. So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and he prays a prayer like in your face. Jesus looked up and he said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said it for them. I said it for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Now you know there's a moment where everybody's like, hold your breath, like, is this about to really happen? And that's the way it always is. When God calls you to do something, and you step out on faith and you do it, there's a moment, there's a moment where you're like, okay, is he going to come through? We were talking about this in men's Bible study this week. We were talking about times that we feel like that God has called me to do something or called somebody else to do something, and you fight it like, man, I don't want to do that. And then when you finally step out, you're afraid, what if I just look like an idiot? What if it don't happen? But you never know what door has been opened and what dead person has been raised until you obey. He said in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped in strips of linen and a cloth wrapped around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes. They were finally obedient. They rolled the stone away. Jesus cried, Lazarus, come out. And the dead rose. We're not talking about in the future. We're not talking about heaven. We're talking about in the moment today. The dead man rose. He was born again. There's a churchy phrase. He was dead and he was born again. Because you cannot have a new life until you die to yourself and are born again. But here's the problem. When he came out, what was he wearing? He was wearing grave clothes. He looked like a mummy. He had been wrapped up. He was bound up. Even though he had been born again, he was still wrapped up in grave clothes. And Jesus says, set him free. That's the problem. See, that's how come sometimes we turn back into goats. We can be born again. We can be on fire for God. We can be like, Lord, I'm all yours. But then we get kind of caught up in the world, and we got all this stuff going on, or we have people in our lives that are maybe just like sucking the life out of us, like vampires, and so we become the mummy. Listen, I should have saved this for Halloween. Who put the grave clothes on Lazarus? The people he loved the most. Sometimes the people we love the most can just wrap us up. And even though we're born again, we're still in dead man's clothes. Sometimes we put the clothes on ourselves. I watched a little movie about a month ago, and I don't remember the name of it. It was kind of weird, but anyway, it was talking about the plague, back during the days of the plague. And everybody was dying in this village of the plague. And it finally got down to the last young lady. She was the last one left. And so the last scene of the movie is her wrapping herself in the death clothes and sewing herself in it because there was nobody left to sew her up into her death clothes. And so she had to do it herself. Listen, we do that spiritually. We do that spiritually. We can be born again, but we can't be alive. We can't have an abundant life because we have wrapped ourselves and sewn ourselves up in our own death clothes. Maybe there's something in your life you just cannot forgive yourself of. Who do you think you are? Jesus forgave you, and he wiped your sin as far as the east is from the west. And here you are just sewing yourself up and not letting it go and not letting God. And so Jesus is saying, unbind him. Get him loose. He has been raised from the dead. He has been born again. It's time for him to live an abundant life. Let him go. He said it angrily. He's not angry at us. He's not angry at you. He is angry at the bondage that you're in. He's angry that you are in bondage. He says, take off the things that have tied you up. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. He is the life everlasting for sure. But he is also life right here and right now. That's what he was saying. He let his friend die on purpose. And he waited on purpose 4 days so that us in this room, right here, right now, could understand that he is not just talking about in the future. He is talking about you today, right now. Maybe you're wrapped up in some grave clothes, some bondage. Maybe you've got something in your life that you're just not letting go of. Maybe there's something that's in your life that, like, you're born again, but you're acting more like a goat than a sheep. Maybe there's something in your life that you need to let go of. Whatever it is that stands between you and your full relationship with Jesus Christ, Jesus says that's an idol. And thou shalt have, more King James, thou shalt have no gods before me. He is our life everlasting, but he is also our life right here, right now. So the question is, Jesus wants to know, are you willing to die? Because nobody gains an abundant life that he wants us to have until you are willing to die. Spiritually, to yourself. Because you have to die to yourself and be raised a new person in Christ, unbound, in order not to just gain life everlasting, but to have the abundant life that he offered right here, right now. If you're sitting in here right now and you're thinking, man, what did I get myself into? I'm going to make this really easy. I'm not going to do anything to embarrass anybody. I don't have you raise your hand. I don't have you come forward. I don't have you do anything like that. If you do not have a relationship, maybe you're a goat. Maybe you've been going through the motions. Maybe you have been sounding like a sheep and acting like a sheep and talking like a sheep. But you're really not. You're really not in his fold. If you make a decision that I want to be this, I want this abundant life. Of course I want everlasting life. But I want the abundant life that he's offering me right now. But I'm bound up. Maybe I bound myself up. And if you want to be set free, it is so simple. We started out the whole service today saying this. It's about a relationship. It's about you talking with him. That's all you have to do. You don't have to come forward. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to do anything like that. You simply have to, in your heart right now, in your heart, if you pray something along the lines of, God, forgive me of my sins. I need you. Give me your Holy Spirit and begin a work in me. I need Jesus. And if you pray that with sincerity, the Bible says, it's a really long verse, you will be saved. Period. That's it. There's nothing else after that. You don't have to get on your knees with a cup of water and crawl up 1,000 steps, reciting a certain prayer. You have to open your heart up and say, I need this relationship. Not just going through the motions, I need this relationship. And if you're willing to do that, you will not only be saved for all of eternity when you physically die, which is coming to all of us, but today you will die and be born again, a different person. We're going to stand, we're going to sing our closing. If you would like to come and have me pray with you, I'm going to be right down front. I'd be happy to talk to you. I'd be happy to pray with you. If you want to come and spend some time at the altar, it is absolutely. Let's all sing.